and I felt like a freaking like magical wizard or something, because I couldn't believe that I basically manifested that happening in the exact way that I imagined it happening, and it was like a miracle.
So find a way to
Hello beautiful light warriors, my name is Monica, and today's video is going to be about how there are more good people in the world than bad. So this video is going to be kind of like a story time video, because I put together like my top 10 stories that I wanted to share today that have happened in my own life. I'm going to be honest with you guys today, I am a little nervous about this video. It's very vulnerable for me, and I also have to film outside because my husband's really busy working inside the RV. But anyways, Spirit has guided me to share these stories for whatever reason, so I'm going to follow my intuition, and this is what we're going to talk about today. So first off, I just want to begin by saying that I understand that there's a lot of bad things in the world, a lot of evil people, a lot of psychotic people who just want to see the world burn and do terrible things to people. But I also know that there are a ton more really good, like genuinely nice, helpful people out there. And I know that from my own experience. And I know anytime you watch the news or mainstream media, especially right now, there is nothing but fear and negativity on there. And I know, some of the stories are true and they're terrible. But right now, for today, I want to focus on some really uplifting, positive stories that I have for you guys. I was inspired to do this video when I went on a walk, like a long walk with my dogs by myself, and all of these random memories just started coming up for me, and it made me remember that there are, like I said, more good people than not. So let's get started with the first one. A lot of these stories are from the time that I was homeless, and it was with my mom. It was just the two of us between the ages, I want to say like between 14 and 16. And we were homeless off and on between Florida and New Mexico. These stories aren't in chronological order of when they happened, but this first one does start in that time period of when I was homeless between 14 and 16. I remember one time when we were looking for a place to stay, my mom was really good about talking to a lot of people and telling them our situation and finding help that way. Like, she was very brave and very resourceful. And we came across these two very young guys who were probably like 18, 19. I don't know what she told them exactly, but we didn't have a place to go for the night, and they were really kind and snuck us into a military base, because they were in the military at the time, living on a base, and they had like a dorm room that both of them shared. And they offered to sneak us onto the base, which they did. They got us past security. They let us stay in their dorm room for the night, and they went to go sleep somewhere else. And I thought that was really, really brave and really sweet of them, because they could have gotten in a lot of trouble because they weren't allowed to let strangers or unauthorized people be on the base and stay in their dorm. So they just told us to like lay low and not go wandering off and just stay there for the night, which we did. The second short story I have is, I remember sometime when I was really young, maybe like 7 or 8 years old, and pretty much my whole childhood we'd struggled with money and could barely get by. And we didn't always have a car. It was actually kind of rare when we had a car, but one time we did, and I guess we got to the point where all 4 of our tires were bald. And I believe we were at a Walmart in Florida, and we were getting an estimate of how much it would cost to get 4 brand new tires at like the cheapest price. And my mom was really sad because we couldn't afford the tires, and we were trying to figure out what to do. I believe we walked away for a moment to try to figure something out, and we came back a few minutes later, and the person who was helping us told us that all 4 of our tires had been paid for anonymously. So someone bought us an entire brand new set of tires, and tires, in my opinion, are not cheap. They've always been, for me, at least for the cars I've had, like at least $500 for the cheaper ones. And I just was in awe that somebody was so generous and so nice. We never found out who it was. I'm guessing it was someone who overheard what we were going through and just decided that they wanted to do something generous, and they anonymously just paid for our tires, and it was like Christmas that day. It was really, really magical. So that is a very fond memory for me. Also, to kind of add on that note, I remember too, there were quite a few times that we would be in line at a grocery store and we didn't have quite enough money to pay for all of our groceries. We'd try to put items back and things like that. And on a few occasions, somebody behind us offered to pay for our groceries or give us the amount that we were lacking, or just pay for all the groceries in general. And that was also a really nice act as well. The next one is another story of some people letting us stay at their house. I don't remember how we met them exactly, but my mom had told them the story, and these were very young people. I want to say they were maybe 17 or 18, and I think they were living with their parents, but their parents were out of town or something like that. They lived in a very rich neighborhood with like a huge house, and they drove us there, let us stay there for the night, and they stayed somewhere else. And I remember the house was super fancy, and they had like laptops and they had Game Boys and just all kinds of expensive electronics laying around the house. And I was really touched that they trusted us enough. They must have had a good feeling about us to not even try to pick up those things and hide them, or to try to take them with them or something. And of course, we didn't touch any of their stuff, but it made me feel good that they didn't treat us like we were going to be criminals or something. So the next two stories are also during the time that we were homeless. And my mom and I had gone to a lot of places, a lot of outreach places to try to get help. And we weren't getting any help. We were being turned down everywhere we went. And we were outside of a church. And my mom was venting to me that she was so upset that everybody kept saying no, no, no. And she did not want to hear the word no again. And so I told her confidently that we were going to go in that church. It was going to be the last place we go for help. And every single thing we asked them, it's going to be yes, yes, yes. And lo and behold, we go into the church. My mom explains our situation. She asks if we can set our tent up on their property after a certain time, if we could sleep there for the night until we figured out something else to do. And as she was telling this story for like a minute or two, the guy she was asking was shaking his head and just going, yes, 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 to everything that she was requesting. And I felt like a freaking like magical wizard or something, because I couldn't believe that I basically manifested that happening in the exact way that I imagined it happening, and it was like a miracle. And not only did they let us sleep there every night for like a week or two, but also when a hurricane was about to come, like a big one, and everyone's boarding up their windows, they asked us if there was any other way they could help us. And my mom told them that we were trying to get to New Mexico. And so they scrounged up some money and they bought us both 2 tickets to go on the Greyhound bus to New Mexico one way. So that also was a huge blessing. So when we had finally got off the Greyhound bus to New Mexico, my mom had arranged to stay in a room for free in a pastor's house, and they were supposed to meet us at the Greyhound station. We got there really late at night, and for whatever reason, they never showed up to pick us up. And I started crying. I was scared. I was freaking out. We were in a new place. We had nowhere to go. And somehow we came across a police officer, and she was very nice. She heard our story. She took me and my mom to get food. She just took us to fast food because that was the only thing that was open at the time. So she took us through a drive-through, and then she paid for us to stay at a decent hotel for the night, and gave us her number and said if we needed anything or if the people didn't show up the next day to call her. And that really meant a lot to me because I had always been afraid of police officers growing up, and you hear so many stories now of officers killing people who weren't dangerous, a lot of the racism that happens. And I think she might have been Caucasian because she had blonde hair, if I remember correctly. And she paid with her own money, out of her pocket, food and a place for us to stay in the night, and she had never met us before. That really put some faith for me into police officers, that there are some really nice ones out there who do just want to help people and who have big hearts. So we ended up leaving that place eventually, and we were homeless again. And my mom and I used to hang out in this place called Hastings. It was a bookstore that had like a little cafe with like coffee and pastries, and it had a video section, a music section. I don't know if there are any left, and I think in New Mexico was the only one I saw. But we used to hang out there because they didn't seem to mind that we were there for hours, and I could read a bunch of books, and I would listen to music, or at least the samples of music when you scan a CD, and I would read the magazines, and it was a nice way to kind of pass the time. And a guy, I think, eventually saw us hanging out there for a while, and he asked if we were okay, if we needed any help. And we told him our situation. He explained that he lived in a place where he rented a room and that he could talk to the landlord and they could probably get us a good deal on renting a room. He asked how much we could afford every month. And it turns out it was in our price range because although we were homeless, we were getting child support, and we would get child support, like a little bit of money every 2 weeks, which would have been enough to pay for one room for both of us to share. He helped us with our stuff. He drove us to his house, and this was nighttime, so we hadn't talked to the landlord yet. So I think he let us sleep on the couch or something. Nobody really used the living room in that house. And then the next day we talked to the landlord. He had a room available that we could afford, and so we moved into there. We used to hitchhike a lot, and I know people freak out. A lot of people freak out when they hear the word hitchhike and get so scared because news and media will basically tell you, and movies, that if you ever hitchhike with someone, you're going to get raped and you're going to die, and they're going to find your body chopped up in little pieces in some shallow grave. I won't say that that has never happened, but I can say that that has never happened to me. That's never been the case for me or my mom. Like I said, we didn't have a car a lot of times, so in Florida, if we needed to get to like another city, there wasn't really like buses or any kind of transportation. So we would walk on the side of the road, and eventually somebody would pick us up, and it would be like, you know, miles and miles and miles before the next town. So there was no way we could physically walk there in a day. And every single time, it never failed, and we did this like probably like a couple dozen times or something like that. And everybody we ever rode with was very nice, very respectful, very kind, and it always worked out well. And then there have been times where I have hitchhiked on my own, mostly when I was younger. I never really like stuck out my thumb or anything like that, but I do remember when I worked as a hostess at Applebee's, and where I was staying was not that far. It was like maybe a couple miles, and my car was in the shop a couple times, like for a week, and so I had to walk back and forth. And sometimes I would work at night, so I would have to walk home or walk there at night. And there was one case where I was walking during the day, and a guy on a motorcycle had pulled over and asked me if I wanted a ride. And I always just used my intuitions. I would think to myself, like, does this person seem like they're going to be okay? And I think with your intuition, if you really practice it and use it, which I did a lot more back then, I could sense if somebody wanted to harm me or if someone wanted to help me. And so if I had a good sense about the person, I would take the ride if I felt like it. So I got on the back of this guy's motorcycle, and he drove me to work, dropped me off, never talked to him again. And I had a friend, a best friend at the time, who worked there as well, and she was so upset when I told her I accepted a ride from a stranger and told me to never do it again, and I should never be walking home at night or anything like that. But I'm the type of person, like, honestly, it's my life, it's my decision. I'm an adult, so I like to decide for myself what I want to do. If something happens to me, then I'll take responsibility for that. I know it was just because she cared and she was trying to be protective, but even now to this day, I do not like people to tell me what I should do, what I shouldn't do. I don't like people to tell me how to live my life. But I like how hitchhiking has always pretty much got a bad rap until like Uber came along, which is kind of the same thing, except for you're just paying the person. And yes, I know they go through a company and they get vetted or whatever, but still, like, you hear stories of just people being creepy when they're giving you rides and you're in a stranger's car. So I just kind of find that like hilariously ironic. And I also think it's funny that it's pretty much acceptable to go home with somebody from a bar that you've never met, a stranger, when you're drunk. I have never personally done that, but I know a lot of people who have done that, and that's kind of the same thing. You're still going with a stranger, but instead of them giving you a ride, they're taking you to their house. Or if you're dating someone for the first time and they pick you up and you're going on your first date and you don't really know that person, which I've done, and online dating, which I've done too, and that's how I met my husband. And I've never had a bad experience with online dating, so I'm not afraid of it. Again, I just use my intuition and go with, does it feel right to be meeting this person? If it doesn't feel right, if you don't feel comfortable, then either don't meet up with them or meet up with them in a public place or something like that. So speaking of hitchhiking, there was a time actually when I was younger. I was probably about 8. My mom and I were driving somewhere in Florida, and we had passed this lady who was carrying like so many grocery bags, like the little plastic grocery bags. And I told my mom as we were approaching her, I said, "Mom, we need to give her a ride." My mom's like, "What?" And I said, "We should give her a ride." And my mom was like, "Okay." Because my thought process in that time was, we didn't have a car a lot of times. We had to depend on other people, and we had been given rides and hitchhike. So I wanted to pay that forward. It just felt like the right thing to do. So we pulled up beside her. My mom asked if she wanted a ride. She accepted, and she was super grateful. And I got into the back seat so she could sit up front, and then we put all of her groceries in the trunk. And we drove her to her house, which was like really far. At least it seemed really far. It seemed like it was a lot of blocks or a lot of miles or something away. And I couldn't believe that she was going to carry all of those groceries that distance. So she thanked us, and she was really grateful after we dropped her off. And I felt so good about that. And that's one of the kindest gestures I think I've done for someone, even though I didn't drive or anything, but I did make the suggestion to my mom to pick her up and take her home. I also remember a time we were at Whole Foods, and my mom had a way with meeting people. She was very extroverted and outgoing, and she would always like end up talking to people and making friends or having conversation. And she was talking to this one young couple that had a baby, and she just happened to mention that she really liked her necklace. It was like I think it's called like an abalone shell. And this lady literally just took the necklace off of her neck and gave it to my mom. And I couldn't believe it. Like, seeing this growing up, I didn't realize that there were so many just really genuinely kind people out there. So another thing that happened during the time we were homeless was in New Mexico, and I had my first job, which was selling newspapers. So my mom and I were both doing this to try to make enough money to pay for a hotel room every night. So imagine these papers only cost like 50 cents on the weekday, and I think like $1 on Sunday. So you weren't making very much money. We were out there for maybe like 4 or 5 hours, and it was tough. It was extremely tough. I was probably about 14 when I started this job. And so we both work in the morning, and then we'd put our money together afterwards and see if we have enough money to get a hotel room, which at that time was probably like 40-50 bucks. And there were multiple times that customers had given me way more money than what the paper cost. So most of the time they would give me like $2 and tell me to keep the change for one paper that cost 50 cents. But there were numerous occasions where people gave me a $20 bill and took one paper. Sometimes they didn't take anything, they just gave me $20. So it's almost like I was like panhandling without panhandling. But anyways, there were also a few times where people gave me a $50 bill and either took a paper and said keep the change or didn't take a paper. And I would get so incredibly overjoyed and like ecstatic when that would happen, because that meant that I was able to pay for a room for the night. I could afford the room on my own. I remember once even I surprised my mom. I went to the hotel that we normally stayed at, I bought the room, and then we went there. So I felt really proud of myself at that time. The last two examples I have of acts of kindness are smaller, but they're still really meant a lot to me. And these were actually more recent. This was probably just like a few months ago. But I was shopping at Trader Joe's, and I had picked up a little plastic carton of like cherry tomatoes, and I put it in my cart, and somehow it came open and it just spilled everywhere. There was this woman, I think she might have been like a college student, and she went and helped me pick up every single little cherry tomato, and there was a lot of them. And I thought that was so nice of her. She could have just kept walking with her cart, but she wanted to stop and help a stranger, so I thought that was really sweet. My My very last example is also one that happened maybe like 2 months ago, also at Trader Joe's. I seem to be a huge klutz when it comes to Trader Joe's, I guess. My husband and I had gotten rid of our 2 small cars and we only had like our big truck because we were getting ready to RV full time. And their parking lot the spots are kind of small and it's kind of a smaller parking lot and it's always super duper busy. There's people everywhere all the time at Trader Joe's. And I circled around many times and I could not get a parking spot. So right across the street was another parking lot for a mall. And I had parked over there for the first time and I had this cart full of groceries and I was walking in the parking lot and I was about to cross the road, but as I was about to cross, I think the cart, one of the wheels got caught on like a dip or a crack in the road, and somehow like the whole shopping cart flipped forward. And I was trying to save it, like I was trying so hard to make it stop before going down, but I just couldn't, and like my groceries just all fell out. And I was so embarrassed, but I just played it cool and I picked up my groceries, and an older gentleman came over and he was like, "Would you like some help?" And I was like, "Sure, thank you." And so he took the time to help me pick up all of my groceries off the ground, out of the road, and put them back into bags into my cart. And I thought that was really sweet because a lot of people just kind of looked at me and some people didn't help, and you know, it was really kind of him to be the one to come over and help. And I'm that type of person too. If I see someone struggling or if I feel like I can help in some way, I always do, because I don't know, it just feels good to help other people. So that is all my stories for today. If you sat through all of those, thank you. I know it was kind of a longer video, but I really wanted to share those little examples and stories that I have from growing up and the kindness that I have received. And hopefully this will help maybe lift someone's mood if they feel like the world is just completely dark and gloomy, because the way that media portrays everything is that like everybody is bad and everybody wants to harm you and stay away from other people. And I don't believe that's the truth. I don't believe everybody just is out to get us and to hurt us. But if you just watch the news, 99.9% of it is negative, and that's all you're gonna hear, because they don't talk about these really nice things that go on in the world and the kindness that people show to other people. There are times that I have almost lost faith in humanity, and I think about these memories and they bring me hope again in humanity. So maybe my stories will help you remember times that people had showed you acts of kindness, or maybe things that you've done for other people. I'm sure there are lots more stories and examples like the ones I gave. I just can't think of them. These are the ones that really stand out in my mind. And remember that saying, if you can't find a nice person, be a nice person. That is one of the mottos I live by. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.